Today, Karen and I are going to be embarking on a topic that we believe is extremely important with respect to tackling those things that come around at the beginning of the year that will lead you into wonderful school year of children thriving and surviving and educators being able to really get to the content. We know that studies and social media have shown that schools as institutions are often faced with needing to address student behaviors. Karen and I have been teachers, we've been administrators, principals, and so we know all too well what happens at a school when everyone comes from their own different backgrounds, their own families, their own special communities, and we all have different ways of doing things. We all have different ways of responding to things. We all have different ways of communicating our needs. And oftentimes we find that there may be a disconnect between our teachers and our students and other students, families, parents, and all those who make up the school community. And so we know that behaviors may be excessive. And today, Karen and I would like to begin a new series that we have titled Elevating Literacy Through Classroom Management that empowers students and educators with the ability to thrive.
I think this is a very important topic to discuss because we know that one of the reasons for our teacher shortage is feeling some of the new teachers feel like they don't have enough support or they don't know how to handle certain behaviors. So hopefully today we can help some of our teacher friends and parents, because mind you, some of the behaviors that students exhibit in school are the same behaviors that they show at home, and some of the strategies that we're going to talk about works well at home too.
Absolutely. Karen and I know very well about the numbers of students that you sometimes would find waiting for you in the principal's office. And sometimes we'd be looking at referrals and thinking to ourselves,
yes.
But we want to make sure that we spend some time around this conversation so that your year will start off on the right track. And once you're on the right track, we believe that that will take you through the year. So Karen is 100% correct. I was scrolling through the other day. We all have Instagram. So I was scrolling through and I ran across a video, and you've probably seen it and heard it, Dr. Julia Hare. And it was recorded a ways back in the 70s or so. And she jokingly stated the following, and you're going to laugh when you hear it, because I know you've heard it. And she says that we made the parents, and she's talking to a group of people on a panel around discipline. And so she said, as a country, we began to make the parents feel afraid to discipline the children. And then we found out that the teachers were afraid of the principal, and the principal was afraid of the superintendent, and the superintendent was afraid of the school board, and the school board was afraid of the parents, and the parents were afraid of the children, and the children, they weren't afraid of nobody. So it made me just really, when I heard that, I laughed, and I said, it's the truth.
Yes.
So sometimes we don't want to say what the truth is. But, discipline is not about, back in the old days where people were swatting you with rulers and all of that. Discipline goes a little bit deeper than that when we think about managing the classroom. It's not really about disciplining the kids, but we thought, Karen and I, as we've been talking, that it really is about setting a classroom up that provides a safe place for students. As mentioned before, Karen and I both have been teachers, and we both have been principals. We've both been administrators at the district level, and we know the struggle. We have witnessed children who were not successful in one classroom to be moved or changed to another classroom and then find that that student is thriving. So then you ask yourself, well, what was the difference? You know, what are the things that made a child not be able to be at his or her best self in one room and be able to be the shining star in another room, right? So Karen, I know that you've got some things to add to that because we have been really going back and forth about this whole topic. So go ahead.
So yeah, this really speaks to classroom management and how comfortable students feel in their classroom.
Right.
Oftentimes, the strategies that we learn when we're going through our credentialing program, it works, it makes sense in theory, but it doesn't always pan out when you try to put it to place when you're in the classroom. And so, you know, for me, that's why, you know, I always had my books. And you know, I'm an avid reader, so I'm always trying to keep up on what's current and, the best ways to manage my classroom. But I would also speak with my administrator. I always had good rapport with my administrator, so I would speak with them as well as colleagues to kind of see what they were doing and how I could incorporate it into my management style, because we know we have to use all the tools in the toolbox in order to keep some behaviors at bay. If you don't have classroom management, you can't teach. Kids aren't gonna learn much because you aren't going to be able to teach the curriculum, which means they won't be able to access it.
Right.
So,
you know, there used to be a saying, Karen, that they would say, if you don't have a plan for the students will have a plan for you.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. And that is the truth. They will always have a plan. And most of the times it's a plan that you don't want. It was not your plan.
Right.
So you're absolutely right. They definitely, you definitely need a plan. And so, you know, I know that we'll probably share some stories that we've had, and I'm going to share one.
Okay, go ahead.
I was teaching kindergarten, and I think this may have been my second or third year of teaching. And I had 33 kindergartners. You know, we hadn't gone through classroom, what do they call it? Classroom reduction. I was not in kindergarten yet. So, you know, when my kids would line up, I thought my line of students would never end.
Right.
And
I remember, look, I came into when we had that 33, 34, and God help you if it was a rainy day and you got extra kids, right?
Oh my gosh, yes. Look, we won't even talk about that. And the fact that I had an aide who really never showed up. So I was basically by myself.
Yes. Oh my, no.
So I had this one student, I'm going to call him John. And this young man could never sit down. And it was just bugging me. I'm trying to teach the class and he's up and he's running around and he's doing this. I'm asking him to sit down and, he might for a few minutes, and he was just all over the place. And so I went to one of the academic English mastery program workshops that we used to have every year. And there was a speaker. She was really good. She would always be there. I forgot her name. And she was talking about managing behaviors. And so I asked her, I gave her the scenario about this little boy. One day he was doing cartwheels in the back of the class. So she asked me, she said, so you're teaching your lesson, and if you ask him a question about what you're teaching, could he answer it? I said, yes. She said, oh, so he is listening, but he
Mhm.
was listening and engaging and digesting the information in a different way than you're used to. So she said, if he's not bothering you, I mean, if he's not bothering the other kids, and if he's learning what he's supposed to learn, let him turn cartwheels in the back of the classroom. I'm like, okay.
Right, right,
That,
right.
but I had to make the adjustment because
Yeah,
he was learning. Everything I asked him, he could answer, but
yes.
his little body just had to move.
Right, right, right. And that goes into that whole idea of building trust in your classroom, creating this environment where not only the students trust you, but you also trust the kids,
Yes.
right? And the kids know who likes them and who doesn't, and who trusts them and who really doesn't trust them. I would, speaking about stories, I always began my year. I had a book that I read, and it was actually written by Maria Shriver. And it was a book on basically about a child with disabilities.
Mhm.
And so it just talked about, it was really small, kid friendly, but it was, about helping kids to understand that everyone is their own person and different, that we're not all necessarily built the same, made the same. And I would always start the year with that book because I wanted kids to know that all of us, we all have strengths, we all have challenges, and that it's up to all of us as a school community, class community, to
Mhm.
support one another. And that sometimes I make mistakes just like everyone else. I might be able to do math a little bit better than I am with writing. But in other areas, somebody else is stronger than I, and vice versa. And so thinking about how to really, I think for teachers as well as parents, thinking about how to set up your classroom, how to even build your home environment, especially if you have multiple children. I have 3 children, and they each learned in their own way. I like to say that my oldest was a real strong average student. He was just really strong in that way. And then my middle child, she actually has disabilities. And so we had an IEP with her, and we looked at teaching her in different ways. And then lastly, I had a daughter who, the last child, and I think because she had seen all that we've done with all the others, she was my brilliant child. But I tell you, she was one of the worst though, because she always had an opinion about everything that we had to say and do. So we thought all the time too about, well, how do you encourage her with what she has, which is different from what each of them has. And so that helps us around, this whole discussion around management. I'll also add to, my own experience includes that my mother and father, when I think about trauma, all students come to school with some kind of traumatic experience.
Mhm.
And we
That's
have
right.
to know that it doesn't matter about class. It doesn't matter about, where you are financially. There are
No,
always
no.
things that happen in our lives that children are coming to school with and that they are dealing with. My mother and father divorced when I was 10 months old. And so I never really knew very much about my father. And so you'd think, well, okay, well, then that's an easy one. She didn't really know him. That wasn't a big deal. But, there was always this thing in my mind when I saw other families, and those children, they came to school with a mother and a father. And so I always would think about, well, why isn't my father here? Or why isn't he present? Those kinds of things.
Mhm.
Um, and then I also had a sister who had disabilities. By the time she was 2, she had stopped breathing 12 times. And so she had some, a little bit of what we would say probably brain damage, but not so severe. She was high functioning, but still needed some supports. And so because she needed those supports, and I was the youngest child, there were only the two of us. So I learned quickly about how to adapt and support someone who doesn't see and learn the same way as everyone else does. And so I've been a real advocate in terms of helping students and teachers and families to really understand that all children can thrive. My sister, with all of her challenges, she was able to have a good job. She drove, she had her own place. And all of those things came about because we set an atmosphere in the home that supported the differences. So some of the things that we would do is, since it was difficult for her to learn to read in certain ways, we might have board games that helped us with her. Or we might have done, just different ways of looking at it, but we never put her down and we never used any words that were negative. There's a saying, and I don't know the statistics, you probably know it, but, for every negative, you've got to do 7 or 8 or say 7 or 8 positives. So that's another key thing for us in the classroom is, teachers sometimes, because we're frustrated, we might do a little bit more of the negatives or, talk about, you don't have, you didn't do all of that. But the positives will far outweigh those negative, things that we bring up for our students. I will always remember those teachers in my life who made me feel empowered and who provided safe spaces, not only for me, but for the other students as well. So, it's because we know the classroom is filled with a lot of different levels. So all children in that classroom need to feel empowered, not just those students who are able or who are meeting, the mark.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that when we were growing up and going to school, celebrating the differences or even acknowledging the differences that wasn't the norm.
Right.
So I can really appreciate now how, that's really emphasized that. There's a saying that, every teacher, look, I can't remember the words, but teach every day in a different way, kind of sort of like that.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, there are multiple learning levels in the classroom, and you have to be able to address those. And the learning levels may be a result of many things. It could be, like you said, some trauma that's in the home that they're bringing to the school. It could be a neurologic deficit that we know nothing about. But, the student has been passed on, and each teacher says, it's a little something, but I don't know. But maybe that teacher just didn't take the time to kind of talk to someone, talk with the parent, talk with the specialist at the school to kind of see, could you take a look at John and see, I don't know, it's something. It could be the child didn't eat that day because there's food insecurity in the home. And so part of classroom management, like you mentioned before earlier, is you have to understand and know your students.
Yeah.
They're not just a number or a name on your roster. You have to know what they are. That's part of building the trust. And so teachers are a part of a child's village,
Absolutely.
Your teachers saw the potential in you and they made sure that you lived up to it. I know for me, my parents worked a lot because they owned a junior market in the neighborhood. My mom would run the business during the day. My dad worked for the city of Los Angeles he retired from there. He never quit his job. He would come after work. He'd come to the store and work. We worked there summers. I hated it, but that was our summer job. And after school, we want to hang out. No, we had to work. And so they both worked. But my mom, when she could, found time to participate in school activities because she wanted to know what was going on.
Mhm.
And so, even though my dad did not really participate in our schooling, he was very clear about four things. I have two sisters, so he had all girls. And so he was very clear about one, don't have any babies because I'm not taking care of them. Two, don't go to jail because I'm not getting you out. Three, don't do drugs because I don't raise drug addicts, and get your education.
Mhm.
And so, for them, school was extremely important. And the other thing for me at school, many of our school teachers, we all went to the same church. So they were part of our village. In terms of behavior, we couldn't do anything because, they go, Miss Jackson. First of all, they never called on me. Okay. I was the child that did not misbehave. But the other two, that's a different story. Um, but, not all children today had that experience. We were lucky to have that. And so we know that in order for our children to be successful, they have to feel safe and confident in their learning space, whether it be at school or at home.
Right. And creating those safe spaces really does begin at home in terms of children's ability to know and understand and feel comfortable with others. I don't want to ever say and put any blames ever on parents, because I think it really is a community, like you said, the village, right? Collectively, we support one another when it comes to educating children and making sure that they have the tools to be all that they can be. I had the privilege of being an early childhood director. And during my years in that position, I was able to really see the level of parental support that you get at those lower levels. Often you'll find that, preschool and elementary, the parents for the most part come, but I'll tell you, as an elementary principal, sometimes I would think, where are the parents at the meetings and things like that? I appreciate technology now because I believe that because of Zoom and some other ways of allowing parents to participate. I see somebody's shaking their head, but I believe that you are able to maybe get some parents that you wouldn't have gotten in the past when you're going further up the line. But at the preschool level, the parents are there. They are, for the most part, participating. They're getting the information about how to, do work with children. And we just want to make sure that there are ways that parents can continue to get that information, which is why we're doing this topic here today, right? About the importance of those things, about creating those spaces. So for instance, in my home, when my children were young, and they didn't necessarily like it in the beginning, but they learned to love it because there was no going around it. We did what I said we were going to do. And, one of those things was during the week, we really did not do the television. It was just not one of those things. By the time you went to school, by the time you came home, they were expected to help with, some of the cooking of the dinner, or expected to help with setting the table or whatever that would, involve, along with homework. There was a space. And, parents, it's important. You don't have to have a large home to have a space where children can do homework. They just have to know where are the crayons, where is the paper, where is the pencil, where are the pens. They should all be in a space that's accessible, and it's always there at all times. If you want children, if you want your kids to really understand the importance of follow through, then they have to know that the homework is important, because that is helping to sharpen your skills, right? As a teacher, and I will say this, as a teacher, I learned that I shouldn't be sending home homework as I got older. When I was first teacher and I didn't have any kids, I thought, oh my God, they just need all this homework. And when I had my
Me too.
right. I want them to be so smart. They need this, they need this, they need this, they need this. Then when I had the children, I said, oh my God, I just need to apologize to all those parents, right? Because it's too much sometimes. You just need math. We taught one concept in math for the day, usually, right? So you send one sheet with 4 problems on it for math for them to go over. And here's the other part about not sending too much, teachers, because if they're doing it wrong, then they are learning the wrong method by doing 50 problems the wrong way.
Exactly.
So, a couple of problems, the parents can see quickly if, seems to be a disconnect. And then when they bring it back to school the next day, the teacher can see it quickly too. It doesn't take a whole lot to know that they're not doing it the correct way. And so at your home, you've got a space. Homework should not take that long. It shouldn't be, so much that nobody can do it. And then there's other things that students and children can do, right? They should be reading something every day. I don't know how much, usually they'll tell you by age, it's a certain amount of time, but they should be reading something, even if it's picture books. Sometimes you read to them, sometimes they read to you. Even a high school student should be reading something every day.
Every day.
That's and right. if your children have these things in place, when they come to class and they are in your classroom, they will feel more ready to be able to participate. Make sure that you have those opportunities, like pick a stick, and you can do this at home as a parent. If you put names on a popsicle stick and you just pull the name, and that's the child who is asked to participate. Kids don't know who's going to be called, and kids know that they need to be ready because they don't know who's going to be called.
Right, right.
And our questions need to be those kinds of questions that sometimes you can say out loud, sometimes you turn to a neighbor, sometimes you write it on a sheet. There's so many multiple ways that you can do that. And when you provide multiple ways for students to participate, you will find that your discipline should diminish. You will find that people you'll begin to see where the strengths are of children and where those things are that they are lacking. What would you add to that, Karen?
Well, I would say definitely, pick a stick, and there are all kinds of strategies I use. Pick a stick. My tables were numbered, and each student had a letter or something like that. So I had we call them dice, but when I was in elementary school, I was quickly corrected as they are number cubes.
All right,
because dice gives a connotation of gambling. I'm like, okay, okay, whatever. Number cubes.
Right.
So I would roll the number cube, but it would have a number and a letter. So number 4 would be table 4, letter B. So whoever is sitting at table 4, letter B, that, they answer the question, or they get up or then share, whatever. But the other thing I would add with that too is if I picked a stick and I called on Debbie, and Debbie, kind of, maybe she didn't have the answer or she wasn't prepared to answer, I would tell her, I said, okay, I'm going to give you some time. I'm going to come back to you. And, I'm going to give you some think time. So what that did is that didn't get her off the hook. That let her know that I'm coming back to you and you are going to answer a question, but maybe not this one. But I also knew my students. So I also kind of knew, what they may be able to answer and what they wouldn't be able to. And
Right.
so, I always gave them that think time, because sometimes students just can't come off of the top of their head, with an answer, whether it be, just sharing or whatever, that they need the think time. And then with the homework, my son is in 7th grade. He started 7th grade a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things his 6th grade math teacher did in her class, as a matter of fact, I think the whole 6th grade team does this, is that they put time in their day for students to start their homework. So that way, they're working on their homework. The teacher is there. If they have questions, if they need help, the teacher is there to help them. And so I emailed, especially his math teacher, because I'm going to be honest, math was not my favorite subject. And, when we start talking about geometry and algebra and all that kind of stuff, I can't help you. So we put a tutor is on retainer because I cannot help you. So, but anyway, I emailed her and I thanked her for doing that, because that helped us, as parents. We're busy. My husband is a retired educator also. So, honestly, with school and then extracurriculars after school, we barely had time to do homework. So I really appreciated the fact that they put that time in, and that allowed him to start and even at most times finish his homework, so that he can, because that's the thing, you can't participate in these extracurriculars if you're not getting good grades, you can't play. We're not doing that. So I really appreciated that. I think,
and as you're saying that, it made me really think about the fact that I know teachers, when I was a teacher, sometimes we would get these complaints, that the parents are letting them play this or letting them do all of that. And that's why they're not doing the homework. And that's why I bench kids for recess. Now I'm going to talk about benching kids for recess another time, because that's a whole nother.
That's another issue. You are absolutely right.
But we have to remind ourselves too, that when students are applying for colleges, they ask for extracurricular activities. They never just say, only give us your grades. They want to know, what else are you doing? What else have you done? And they want to know about leadership. What have you, and when you were in these clubs and all of that, were you a leader? Did you do anything that supported leadership in those groups? So it's important for children and families to be able to learn, and teachers to navigate through this idea that children do need something besides just the classroom. They do need to participate. Our kids, they learned instruments, and we believe that was so instrumental in helping them to focus. Right? Because there's so much that happens when you do other things. And of course, sports. Look, we talked today about how obese the kids are and all this kind of stuff. And then we sitting them down for recess because they didn't do the homework. And then all of these things that are keeping them in.
Like after sitting in the classroom for an hour. Yeah.
Without moving, because we're afraid to let them move.
That's right. Without moving and talking.
All of these things. Yes. So it's important to know students and to create an environment that actually supports them. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I the other thing I wanted to mention too, when you were talking about parents being involved with their children, I would often hear the parents don't come to the meetings or whatever because they don't care. Well, no, I don't know one parent who does not care about their child.
Correct.
Now, they may not know how to support them in their schoolwork, but that doesn't mean that they don't love them.
Right. Right.
Maybe they're not coming to the meetings because they don't want to talk to you, because every time they see you, it's something negative.
Yeah.
So I had one of the teachers when I was an AP, that was her complaint, about this parent, and she never comes to parent conferences. I never see her, but the teacher was calling this woman almost every day about something that this boy did. So I said, you know what? Let's try this. The next time you call her with something positive.
Yeah.
I said, and let's do that for a while.
Right.
And let's see how it goes. Because the mom would be sour, have this sour face on her, look on her face when she saw the teacher. So the teacher started doing it, and the parents started to soften up. And so she started to get more out of the parent. So here again, I have to always tell teachers, let's think about the educational experience that some of the parents had. Some of the parents have had negative experiences at school.
Yeah.
So they know by law they have to send their child to school. They don't have to come to the meeting. They don't have to come to parent conference. That's what we want them to do, but they don't have to. But know your student, know your families, know your parents.
Yes.
Because that's also creating a safe space too. Parents have to feel comfortable coming to educators about their child.
Right. And there's always a way to be able, if you can always start with, those things, because everybody has something they do well. So look for those things that those students are doing well, and you can communicate that with the parents. And then maybe you don't go through a whole litany of all the things that they're doing incorrectly, because you can't correct all of that at once anyway.
That's right.
So you just start with one thing that you think you can get, some really good bang for the buck, and you work hard at that, and then you go to the next thing, right?
Right.
That's like all of us. I can't work on 10 things and expect that they're all going to be perfect, right? All at once. I'm going to take a little bit here and I'm going to take a little bit there,
Right.
So yes, absolutely.
Right. So
go ahead.
I was going to say, so, when you're creating an effective safe space, whether it be at home or at school, what happens is, you're creating and you're sustaining an orderly learning environment. You're improving the child's academic learning, and you are also fostering their social emotional growth. You're increasing their academic engagement, and it lowers negative behaviors in the classroom, on the yard, in your home. And so something else that I would always suggest to teachers would be to allow students to be part of creating the rules. And when you're stating the rules, state them in a positive way. Instead of saying no running, you're going to say walk with quiet feet. Okay? You're going to state it in a positive way. Students can be a part of rules at home too. Now, there are some rules that parents will have that are non-negotiable, but for the most part, the child can be a part of their rule creating. And so, an example is last night, my son came home from football practice, and what was yesterday was Tuesday, and I look, I'm like, they call me Principal Paysinger because, I'm like the rule maker. So it's like, don't make me be Principal Paysinger, okay? So I came home, his room was a mess. I had asked him to um, um, clean up the yard or something. He didn't do that. So when he came home, I, reminded him. I said, so there is a consequence. What should your consequence be?
Mhm.
So he said, we usually, after he does his work and gets ready or whatever, we usually allow him, 30, 45 minutes to play Fortnite or whatever he wants to play on his computer. And it's either the computer or his phone. So, and I told him, and that's 10:30, I need the phone. I didn't have it last night. So what is your consequence? So he said, well, I guess I can't play any games tonight. I said, that's a good one. And then, and then he said, well, maybe I won't have my phone. I think he said for the not during the school day, but when we come home, I get the phone immediately instead of like when I said that's perfect. So I'm not the bad guy. He created his own consequence. Everybody's happy.
Right. Yes. And I like that whole idea of helping them and teaching them, yes, of course, letting them talk about their own consequences, but then also adding to that, having that conversation about why we have these rules, right?
Mm-hmm,
So here are the rules we've decided together, but why are they important?
mm-hmm.
What is it that, is happening because in the good sense, because of this rule that we have created. And so teachers can do that. The one thing that I think, and this comes back as a principle too, that I want to just touch on a little bit, has to do with teaching children what it means to be respectful. Because often my referrals from the teacher when the student is waiting for me in the office was that he was not being respectful. And so then we said, well, what does that mean? Well, he's talking back to me or she's talking back to me. And so I think teaching students that there is a way to communicate your needs without yelling and screaming, because these kids sometimes they feel like they have not been heard, and so then they're yelling, they're screaming, and sometimes they're using words that are so profane. I just tell you.
Yeah.
And I remember one little boy, and he would always use the F word. And one day, and I would we'd go through, these examples of how you can use different words. We pull up thesaurus, and so what's another word that you could use for that word, and all of that kind of stuff. And then one day I said, I saw Mom, and I was like, Mom, come on in here and have a chat with me. And she was like, okay. And then she said, what the F was he doing now? Said, there it is.
That's right. That's right. Right there.
And so, Mom and I had the same conversation, Mom. We want him to be able to communicate his needs, but we know that in the classroom, he's going to need some different words to use. So we went through that whole thing together, and I tell you, it did help. And I think she didn't realize at the time that he was mimicking what, he was hearing. And so, and remember,
oftentimes they don't.
Yes. And remember, I was at the elementary level. So, quite naturally, I was seeing him a lot. But, just the opportunity to have these discussions with the kids about why, opposed to, they don't know that it's necessarily disrespectful if within that, their immediate space, that is the word that we use to communicate, whatever. And so it's important for kids to know the why and not just what you expect of them, but also the why behind it.
It is. That works so well. And I think part of our training is, we learn all these strategies. We've talked about several of them, to create a safe space for our students, to help manage the behaviors. And the one we've talked about the most is understanding your students. You have to know them, their family, their cultural background, because a lot of times some of the behaviors, are cultural. And if we don't know, our reaction is going to be different. But this is part of understanding and knowing your students and your families.
Yeah.
Practice patience. All right. And you have to be able to detach. Sometimes ignoring works.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so, you can have a student that's just acting out in the classroom. And if you ignore them and go to another student, do something, they'll, oftentimes they'll think, oh, well, shoot, she's not even paying attention to me. Let me just go on and do what I'm supposed to do. That works at home because I do it.
Right.
Look, I'm telling you, I use my strategies in the home.
Yes.
And I found myself, when they're younger, how I behave with him is different than as a middle schooler, because now, they're trying to flex their autonomy. Yeah. And so, I had to flip because, I will be Principal Paysinger in a minute, but Principal Paysinger doesn't always work. So I have to know when, it's a balance and I'm learning, but I do use my strategy. The other is set effective limits. Okay.
Yes.
Know what they are. And the expectations should be clear. They should be simple and stated positively.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Yes.
If you create a schedule, keep it.
And keep it for a while. You can't just, you try something, in a week and you say, oh, well, that's not working. I need something else. No, habits take, 21, 22 days to habit. So you got to stick with it over time.
You have to stick with it over time. And when you first set the schedule and it doesn't work, it might not work. And it might work day one and not work day two. Like you said, you have to stick with it in order for it to become a habit.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Be aware of the different causes that creates whatever behaviors that you're seeing. I mean, is John sitting next to Debbie and Debbie is poking him in the side where we can't see? And then all of a sudden he just blurts out, leave me alone.
Right.
And then you ask what's going on, and now you're flustered because you're screaming out in the middle of the lesson. Know what is the cause of the behavior. That requires, here again, knowing your students and talking with them, having a conversation.
Right. And as a teacher, moving the kids around sometimes too.
Yes.
They should not be in the same seat, especially elementary, because they're there all day. That same seat, they came in and they're there until the end of the day. Absolutely not. You've got to have some small groups, change them around for different reasons, change them by color, change them by name, change them by letter, give students opportunities. I mean, let's face it, if we go to a conference and it's an all-day conference, you've gotten up and went to the restroom and gotten some coffee, all kinds of
especially
stuff.
If it's boring.
Exactly. So we can't expect them to do anything that we can't do, right? You need some time to move around and stretch and to have dialogue with others.
Yes.
So I shouldn't be just talking to them all the time. And even as a parent, sometimes what I might say to one of my children, you might come over to the house or something and say the same exact thing. And all of a sudden, oh, Miss Paysinger is so brilliant. And you're like, wait a minute. I told her that, right? So, just giving opportunities too for others to speak, into, the children's lives and even amongst themselves. Sometimes peer to peer is so much stronger than what we can do as adults with these, with the children.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Make mistakes a learning opportunity. I
Mhm.
always tell people mistakes are good. That's how you learn.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
Absolutely.
you don't learn from doing the same thing the same way every day. You learn from your mistakes. So
That's
that's a
right.
learning opportunity. That's a teachable moment
Right.
in
Right.
school and at home.
Right. Right. And I would add to that, um, for adults and children alike to really think about the biases that we come with too.
Mm,
And then try our hardest to remind ourselves, am I saying something or thinking something about a student because of the biases that I have? Because we all have them.
hmm.
It's not, it's a shame to think that I don't have any biases. We come with them because typically our makeup, our homes, what maybe we have been taught along the way, and it's not until, especially if we're in a community that's not as diverse, and
Hmm.
then we go somewhere and we see that it's diverse, we have some thoughts about, maybe someone else's culture, maybe the way that that teacher is doing things. And as a teacher, we have biases with kids.
Hmm.
If I think that a child should not speak to me that way, then too bad, you going to the office, period. Instead of trying to get to know them a little bit more. And then I'll
Right.
say this last thing too. When we send kids away, we lose that authority that we have with them
Mm,
being in our presence,
that's
because
right.
they come to learn that she can't do anything with me. So all I have to do is keep doing that. And then she or he will send me to the office where I could just sit, because, the principal's not always just sitting there waiting. So sometimes I could be sitting there for 20, 30 minutes before she even comes back. I get a whole afternoon in the office while
Without any work.
without any work, without anything, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
remember that they don't learn, they're missing everything that you're teaching while they're sitting, waiting to go back.
That's right.
So, hold on to your authority, try all these strategies and things that we are sharing with you. Remember to take away or elevate your own biases so you can see more clearly. All of these things that we have shared today. We are coming to the end of our program. Can you
We
believe
are. I
it?
know.
And so, yes, yes.
Look, we have so much more to talk about.
I know, I know. There were a couple of things, but we will continue this conversation at another time, um,
Yes.
because we know that there are probably many questions and many thoughts and ideas that others have that they'd like us to touch upon. And we are certainly willing and able to do that during our next podcast.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So we are setting up a web page. Sharice, you wanna I'm sorry, Dr. Reese, you wanna talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So we have decided that we've gotten folks who are like, well, you were talking about this and you were talking about that. Do you have a resource for this? Do you have a resource for that? So we thought we might set up a web page where you can come and get resources. You can download and things like that. And then we also are going to do a blog where we talk about, specific things where people can provide us with additional questions that we can talk about, here on our podcast that we may not be getting, at this time. So, be looking for that. We'll be sharing that with you in the near future.
Awesome, awesome. So I always like to leave you with a quote, something just to think about. And so the quote today is, no matter how challenging the student's behavior, and when I say student, I also mean a child to a parent. No matter how challenging the student's behavior, all students want the same thing. They want to be loved, they want to be valued, and they want to be understood. And so I got this quote from the Paraprofessionals Handbook for Effective Support in an Inclusive Classroom. So please remember to listen to us on YouTube at Educational Dialogue, and or listen to our program wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.
Until next time, keep elevating the educational dialogue. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again in the near future.